My name is Carol Josephker. I am a retired social worker. I work for the Department of Human Services here in Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I retired in 2016. For 3 years, a little over 3 years, I worked for Child Protective Services. And then the last 20 years, I worked for the Area Agency on Aging. And the last 8 of that, I was a supervisor.
So you mentioned that you guys were the gatekeepers to that. How did social policy impact your clients, like the Medicaid and Medicare that you're talking about?
Mostly when I say the gatekeepers, generally what we would be determining, there's 2 parts of eligibility for either personal care home, nursing home, or community-based services, okay? One of them is medical, and one of them is financial. So we really did the medical part. We did not determine financial eligibility, except for those seniors that are in the community and want services in their home. Because basically, the whole country is moving to a different kind of service. Instead of putting people, warehousing them in personal care homes or nursing homes, they can stay in the community. They can live alone or they can live with a family member. So that financial eligibility is determined. Generally, the guidelines are state. So the state of Pennsylvania would determine. And that's pretty much across the board, across the country. But it depends, again, on where you're living. So there's that financial eligibility. So we might help somebody fill out those forms.
Okay.
And there's tons of forms and tons of copy. And then that goes to the Department of Public Welfare. But we work very closely with the Department of Public Welfare to help people because there's things like spend down. For example, if a senior has $30,000 in their bank, they would not be eligible for Medicaid dollars, but maybe they need a new roof. Maybe they need a new hot water heater. Mm-hmm. So we would help them look at how that money could be spent, and then they could what's called a spend down, and then they could receive services in their home and get those Medicaid dollars.
And when you round a bend, you hit a fog bank. And so your natural reaction is to just slow down and proceed very, very slowly. And you just keep going like that until the fog clears. After the fog clears, then you continue on until you round the next bend, and then you hit another fog bank.
In your experience, was Alzheimer's disease a problem among the aging populations that you dealt with?
Yes. We saw a lot of people that were in the early stages of Alzheimer's with various cognitive issues. Many times family members would either be caring for their aging parents, either in their home or perhaps in their own family home. And they would be dangerous for them to be alone. So our assessors were very, very well trained when they were doing an assessment to look at the big picture and was this person safe to be alone in their home? And that often is a very, very tough decision to make. So we saw a lot of people. We also saw some young folks that had brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries as a result of some kind of a trauma. And they would, of course, have cognitive issues that are very different from Alzheimer's, but they had cognitive issues. And so we might see a young person that was applying for services in their home, and that would be Medicare and Medicaid dollars. And, of course, the combination of those two, they would apply for Medicare perhaps and then go ahead and apply for Medicaid that would be supplementing that.
Okay.
It could happen 2 times, but some days it happens 10 times. Some days it happens so many times that I'm not able to do anything for the whole course of a day. You can't get a thought from here to here to come out in a verbal way. And I just stopped him. I said, listen, I said, what I really want to know is, do I have Alzheimer's? And he paused and he said, yes, you have what we call early onset Alzheimer's disease. Now, that was the last thing that I heard, because I just lost it at that point.
Okay. So were there any like barriers in terms of maybe like policy or just within the department for helping your clients? Like, were there just things that you couldn't do because of policy wise?
When I think of that question, it's hard for me to answer, except I just think it's money.
Okay.
It's just money. There's so many guidelines that were given to us by the state that perhaps the person would be just $5, $10 over the cutoff, so they couldn't receive those intensive services in their home, and that was probably our biggest barrier. And of course there are policies in the younger population, the under 60, because there are many people who would want services. Perhaps they were wheelchair bound, or they had some kind of a cognitive issue. And they needed services in their home. And that is a whole other, that's a lot of barriers to that, because there's not enough money to go around to provide services, provide somebody to come to their home. So, yeah, we did.
Okay.
State and federal dollars often really was the issue.
I was diagnosed in October of
And at that point, I realized exactly what I was doing, that I was being a voice for them.
My mother was still living with Alzheimer's disease.
I was being a voice for people that were no longer here, including my mother.
Did your clients have dedicated regular visitors, people who checked in on them, kind of checkups or things like that?
Well, yes and no. We would often see people who were alone, who had no family members. Their adult children perhaps had moved out of town, or their adult children had jobs that kept them from providing care. But we had various programs that would help someone have a friendly visitor. Number one, Meals on Wheels, home delivered wheels, whatever you call it, was a big one, because that meant someone was knocking on their door 5 days out of the week and would eyeball them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes a friendship, although they were just delivering a meal and they would only be there maybe 5 minutes, they would be checking up on them. Mm-hmm. We also had senior centers where seniors could go to, and we would encourage them. There would be sometimes transportation issues that we would try to work out. But one of the biggest programs that we had was called Senior Companions. And Senior Companions were actually aging folks themselves, over 60, who were trained. They were volunteers, however they received reimbursement for transportation. And they visited someone perhaps once a week. Mm. They were not there to clean or do the dishes, but they often would help with bill paying, opening mail, playing cards, taking a walk. Mm. So there are seniors that certainly don't get a visitor or someone to check in on them, but our assessors would work very carefully and work very diligently to hook them up with someone if they were totally alone. Okay. So we did see a lot of seniors, and I think in Pittsburgh there were a lot of adults who moved from Pittsburgh a number of years ago because of economic reasons. So they moved out and moved to other cities far away, and their parents were left alone, and that was a big issue for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
I watched my mom go from this smart, vivacious woman, didn't do anything wrong in her life, and then she got Alzheimer's.
Do you think that there's a problem with stereotypes in terms of like what kind of social roles older populations should be engaged in? And does that affect what kind of programs are offered for them?
That's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
Because yes, one of our problems, and sometimes our assessors they would express frustration in the fact that they were only seeing a part of the population of seniors in Allegheny County, those that wanted services.
Okay.
Meanwhile, there were tons of programs for people in senior centers, and they would do all kinds of things. There would be classes offered in all kinds of crafts, dancing, yes, knitting and crocheting and quilting, but no. So there was a whole bunch of really healthy, active seniors in the community. Unfortunately, our agency often didn't see them, and we would say, "Gee, it would be really great to go to the senior center and see a bunch of folks that we really active because we're seeing those for the needs." So I think that seniors are stigmatized in a way, but I think generally our society now looks at seniors in a little different way. To be 80 years old doesn't mean you're old anymore. There's a lot of 80-year-olds that are very, very active. So I think culturally there's some changes there.
Okay.
I don't really need to walk because I walk at least 5 miles inside every day, going from room to room, trying to find something, and I can never find it. It's kind of like you walk and your mind it doesn't just go blank, it's just nothingness. Just completely barren, completely empty. You can't remember anything. And that's the scary part. You can't remember anything.
Is there anything that you would like to share additional about working with the aging population? Like maybe what was one of the more rewarding things that you got to do when you worked for that department?
Well, I think personally, I absolutely, and sometimes I would dread going to a certain neighborhood because it was hard to park or the senior center. It was just difficult to get in, but I would always love to sit with the senior because I learned so much. Experiences that people have had over the years. There's a lot of immigrants in Allegheny County, and I'm talking current immigrants, certainly, people that we serve, but people who had come from other countries, 40 years ago. And, culturally, there's so many different pockets in Pennsylvania as well as Allegheny County. Recipes, religion, just wonderful, wonderful experiences. I always said that aging was about loss. You lose your health, you lose family relationships, you lose friends, you lose the ability to care for yourself. But what a blessing to grow old. My PCP said to me one day when I was complaining about growing old and having arthritis, he just looked at me very sternly and said, "Carol Jo, it's a blessing to grow old." And I thought, oh my goodness sakes, he sees people that are dying. Yeah, I should quit feeling sorry for them.
I'm not going to come out of it. I'm going to stay there. I don't want that to happen. That's why I fight. I fight every day.